So from paid advertising to SEO, choose the right strategy. That's what I'm going to be talking to you about today. But before we get started, I just wanted to play a quick game of word association with you. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to put up some words and I want you to see if you can tell which word I'm talking about. And if you can put it on the chat on the right hand side of your screen, that'd be great. So here goes. Homeschooling, furlough, alcohol, debt, cash flow. So can anyone guess which word I'm talking about? Well, it's the coronavirus. So I don't know about any of you, but I'm sure some of you watching today have experienced a similar thing. But this has certainly been one of the most stressful times I've experienced in business. I think one of my biggest concerns has been running out of cash. So I've got 8 staff members, and obviously I've got to pay their salaries each month. So it's been a particularly challenging time, and I've been in business now for 7 years. I've been in sales and marketing for 12 plus years, but this has definitely been one of the most stressful times I've experienced. And I think coupled with that, I've had to also homeschool my 2 boys. So I've got a 4-year-old and a 7-year-old, and I've been expected to homeschool them throughout this, coupled with running the business at the same time. So it's been a little bit challenging. But one of the things I did decide right at the outset of this was that I was going to market our business. And I think we've certainly been guilty of this, probably like many businesses, that we don't do for ourselves what we do for our clients. And what I did decide is that actually what we're going to do throughout this period is market our own business as effectively as possible. So we've been doing paid LinkedIn adverts, we've been doing Google ads, and we've also really been focusing our efforts on our own SEO. And one of the things I would say is that while sales have slowed, which I think they probably have for everyone during this time, we have still managed to sign 6 new projects during this time, and I'm quite pleased with that. I think that's a pretty positive thing. And the other thing is that the main purpose of me deciding to market Urban Element through this time was that I wanted to be able to hit the ground running when, some sense of when we return to some sense of normality. And I'm already starting to see that that's paying dividends. So in the last week alone, we've had 2 new inquiries, one from a fairly large manufacturer based in Oxfordshire looking for a brand refresh, and the other we've had an inquiry from a private school also based here in Oxfordshire, looking for help to set up their Google ads and manage their Google ads ongoing, and then also looking at their paid social media marketing. So enough about me. The things I'm going to talk to you about today are paid advertising right through to SEO, and I did say that I would potentially help you decide which strategy is right for you. I think that's probably a little bit ambitious in 20 minutes, but I'll certainly do my best to give you perhaps some things I've seen businesses not do particularly well, and some hints and tips on how to do things more effectively, and that will hopefully help steer you in the right direction for which strategy is right for you. But to start with, I thought it would be helpful just to talk you through what actual paid search is. So paid search marketing affords businesses the opportunity to advertise within the sponsored listings of a search engine or a partner site by paying effectively. And as you can see on the right hand side, just in those blue boxes, I've put up a screenshot of Bing, so you can advertise on Bing, and Google, which you're probably all familiar with. They're the sort of 2 primary search engines. I think Google is still miles ahead. But you can see in the blue box, you've got what are paid adverts effectively. So that's paid search. What is paid social media marketing? So this is another form of paid advertising. Paid social media is a method of displaying advertisements or sponsored marketing messages on popular social media platforms and targeting a specific sub-audience. And on the right-hand side, you've got some Facebook adverts actually that we did for a client of ours that long ago. SEO. So perhaps better known as search engine optimization. It's the practice of increasing the quantity and, more importantly, probably the quality of traffic to your website through organic search engine results. So you can see in the blue box, I've just outlined which are the organic search results. So you typically have several ads at the top of any search results, and then the organic ones kick in. So you can see there in the blue, we've got the organic results. So hopefully that helps just give a bit more of an understanding as to what those things are. What I thought might be helpful is just sharing with you the top 5 mistakes that I've seen businesses make and potentially how to avoid those mistakes. So this is a good one. So no goals. So I'm sure none of you have done this, but I've certainly seen a lot of business owners just chuck a load of mud at the wall and hope that some of it's going to stick. And I would encourage you with any of these activities, from paid advertising right through to SEO, to set some really clearly defined goals. You've probably all heard of the acronym SMART, so specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and time-bound goals, so that you're not just chucking mud at the wall, but that you've got some really clearly defined goals as to what it is you actually want at the end of all of this hard work and investment. This is a favorite one. It probably is because I run an agency, but no need to seek out expertise. I think because Google Ads is accessible to anyone, so anyone can set up an ad campaign. The same is true of social media marketing. So anyone can set up a paid LinkedIn advertising campaign, and anyone can boost posts on social media. So what it tends to do is encourage people to do it themselves. Now, there's certainly a place for that. Perhaps affordability is an issue and you need to do it yourself. But I would encourage you to seek out expertise from an agency, and at the very least, perhaps to educate yourself with an online course. You know, just like you hopefully wouldn't Google your symptoms, although I think we've probably all done that before and it's quite scary. It's a similar thing. I would kind of urge you to get some expertise if you can. So a flash in the plan, a lack of consistent ongoing activity. I frequently see this with businesses, and it tends to be because you don't see immediate results, and then there's sort of a sense that perhaps we should stop doing this, but that tends to be because there hasn't been any goals set, or there hasn't been any expertise sought, or some of the things I'm going to mention later on. But it does need to be a consistent, ongoing activity, and not just a flash in the pan. This one. Well, so not having a plan. I think there's a saying that a goal without a plan is just a wish. So you need to set some really clearly defined goals, and then you also need to have a plan. And particularly for SEO, that might even be a 12-month plan where you plot out every month what it is you're going to actually be doing. So I would really encourage you to make sure that you've got a plan in place, or that your agency has a plan in place for you. A lack of consistent look and feel. I see this all the time. So basically, businesses tend to lack a consistent look and feel across platforms. So they might look different on LinkedIn to the way they look on Facebook or Instagram. particularly from an image perspective, using consistent imagery, sometimes even from a tone of voice and content. And there is an argument to say that actually on different platforms, a slightly different tone of voice is, required. Particularly LinkedIn is quite a professional environment. So if you're advertising on LinkedIn, it's worth bearing that in mind. And on Facebook, perhaps you can, it's more of a personal environment. You can have a slightly friendlier tone of voice. But nonetheless, you do need to have a consistent look and feel. They should be able to identify with your brand and your business across the different platforms, just to maintain your brand equity, but also for trust reasons, to generate more trust. So those were the top 5 things I've seen businesses perhaps not do so well and to be mindful of. The other thing that I thought would be helpful and worth sharing is the top 5 successes that I've seen and how to achieve these. So, define your audience. This is a really, really important one. And actually, we've started working with the client just in the last 2 weeks, called Scott Roundtree. They're an estate agents. And one of the things we did with them right up front, we're doing their Google ads, and longer term, we're going to be doing their SEO for them and paid social media marketing. But one of the things we did right up front was define really clearly who their audience are. And when I say define who their audience are, we understood that Scott Roundtree sell slightly larger properties at the higher end of the market. And so when we define their audience with them, we talked about a slightly older demographic, so an older age range. They were slightly more affluent, wealthier, and their location was really important. So we talked about needing a location in Oxfordshire and Cheltenham and a certain radius that they'd be prepared to travel. The other thing we did is looked at some of the kind of more softer elements as well. So what kind of interests do they have? What kind of hobbies do they have? Right down to things like what kind of papers do they read. And it's quite scary, the kind of data that you can actually access on platforms like Facebook and Instagram when you are doing advertising. So the more you can define your audience, the better. And I quite often hear business owners say, oh, well, we're right for anyone. Anyone can use our service or our product. But I would imagine you've probably got an ideal client profile, and I would really, really encourage you to clearly define your audience before you do any of these activities. So, set goals. So this is kind of the opposite to one of the ones I mentioned I've seen business owners perhaps not do. And what I would really encourage you to do is set goals, particularly to ensure that you get a good return on your investment. And I think it's Stephen Covey's 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And I paraphrase now, but I think one of his habits is start with the end in mind. And I would encourage you to do that. Particularly with any kind of paid advertising as well, because otherwise you're not going to see a return on investment. And one of the things, just coming back to Scott Roundtree, we set some really clear goals with them. And it was quite refreshing because the MD, Gareth, we talked to him, what was it he wanted as a return on investment, bearing in mind he was what his ad spend was and what he was paying us to manage that ad spend. And he was very clear, he wanted 20 grand a month return. And we could work our way back to say, okay, well, what's your conversion rate? Therefore, how many inquiries do you need? So I would really encourage you to set some clearly defined goals. Do your keyword research. So from an SEO perspective, I think a lot of us are aware that keyword research is a big part of that. But even when it comes to things like Google Ads, I would urge you to do your keyword research. And by that, I don't just mean looking at the volumes or how competitive keywords are, but also finding out how relevant they are to your business as well is really important. Refine. So this is kind of the opposite of the flash in the pan that I quite frequently seen. So you do really need to refine. So not just run one social media marketing campaign, but you need to keep refining your campaigns, because often what happens is the first campaign isn't always as successful as you'd hope, particularly with paid social media marketing, and you need to keep refining those campaigns, and then you'll get to a point where you've got a really good formula that generates you a good return on investment. Commitment. So we all love commitment. This is a big one, and this is probably the one that should determine which strategy is right for you, because SEO, for example, is a much longer game. So it's a much longer term commitment. It should underpin the foundations of everything you do, but ultimately, if you do, for example, because of the current environment, perhaps you need to quickly prime your sales pipeline and you need those inquiries coming in, then perhaps Google Ads is more appropriate for you, because Google Ads will be a much quicker win, whereas SEO you really need to invest in for 12, sometimes 12 months or longer. So commitment is really important, and with paid social media marketing you're going to need a much bigger upfront commitment in terms of planning and probably time and money investment as well. So hopefully that's given you some tips. Certainly, I'm just going to recap. So do define your audience. Begin with the end in mind. Do your research and do refine things and commit for the long term as well. Don't just chuck a load of mud at the wall and hope that some of it will stick. DIY, I mean, there's a case for it, absolutely, if you need to do it yourself, but if you can't expertise, then please do. Don't be a flash in the pan, and don't forget to plan, and don't reinvent yourself across platforms. I know it's tempting, but don't. So just to kind of wrap up before I go into questions at the end, one of the things we have been helping our clients with is access grants for paid advertising and SEO. So Oxford for SMEs can get up to 50% match funded grants to help with paid social media marketing, SEO, web design, and e-commerce. Oxlep has grant funding available, so they're the ones that we've been using, and it's via the Escalate program. So you can receive up to 50% of your eligible expenditure. There's grants between £1,000 and £25,000 available once per business. So I think it's a real opportunity for business owners and businesses to tap into. So I would get in touch with Oxlep, or even get in touch with us. We've been helping a lot of our clients through this process, so we can certainly help you if you need any. And just to wrap up some tools, so some of these tools, actually most of them are available free of charge. So for example, you're probably all aware of Google Analytics. That's a great tool to kind of help refine any paid advertising that you're doing, and particularly SEO work. Google Trends is another great one, and it's been really interesting more recently to use Google Trends to see what kind of terms people are searching for given the circumstances, and perhaps particularly for your industry as well, it'd be interesting to see, are people still using the same terms, or are they looking for a slightly different service or product. So Google Trends is a great one to use. Screaming Frog's another good one from an SEO perspective. And we use a tool called SEMrush. I think you can possibly get a license free of charge, but that might be one of the tools that you need to pay for. We pay for it as an agency because we use the enterprise kind of version of it for all our clients. But it's a really good tool to use for keyword planning, but also more importantly to look as well at what your competitors are doing. It's really helpful for that. So just some tools there to help with paid advertising and SEO.